So I'm really excited to have these three women here today, and I'm going to do a quick introduction of them in like 15 seconds each, and then allow them to take about 5 minutes to introduce themselves. I'm only talking to one person. And you can take less than 5. So just so you all know, they are actually positioned by who talks the least to the left and who talks the most to my right. So gear all your questions towards her, because this is my chance to torture my mom for any torturing that she may have done. No, I'm just kidding. So first, the person to the far left is my mom, whose name is Wilma Gibson, affectionately known in community as Mama G. And she was born in 1953 in Ashdown, Arkansas. And tomorrow is her 69th birthday. So we're gonna all do shots after this is over, shots of water. And so she actually integrated Foreman High School after her freshman year of high school, and spent her last 3 years of high school in an integrated school. Before that, she attended Unity School, which was the all African American school. I did a lot of my graduate work on her yearbooks of those 3 years, and kind of chronicling some of the personal comments that were placed into those books. But she was in the rural South, and I feel like I wanted her to come and speak. One, because she's my mom and I love her deeply. And two, because I think that it's so important to hear this perspective, right? In the middle, this is Jill Mesmer, an official wild woman. And I'm just joking. Jill is one of my spiritual sisters. We met at the Center for Spiritual Living, and Jill embarked upon her own racial awakening. How long has it been? About
5 years.
5 years?
About this time of year.
Okay, about 5 years ago. And so in that process, I was subjected to all of her white people questions. And from that, we developed a really beautiful friendship in which I learned how not to choke people that I deeply love, even when they ask me things and I'm like, don't ask me that. But also the author of Blinded by the White, which is a very practical 10 short essays about how she has experienced her white privilege and how it made her open up. She also is working on a documentary called A Fish Doesn't Know It's Wet, and that is about her personal journey to awareness. And then closest to me, wearing purple, is the international jazz success singer, Mother Mary Moore, who is also one of my BFFs as well. Mother Mary is from Froggy Bottom, Louisiana. And she went on to have an illustrious jazz career. And I won't send you the link while she's here, but she's one of the breakthrough artists at Showtime at the Apollo. And so she is she's here. That's what we care about the most, is that she's here. And she has traveled the world, and she has the cutest grandchildren ever. I don't know if she has favorites, but I think that the one that wrote a poem talking about how fly my grandmother is, who's 9, and her name is Stella, kind of has her heart in an extra special way. But she has a ton of successful children and a very interesting story. And so I am so excited to have them all here. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, Mommy, you want to go first? Just get it out the way.
What do you want me to say?
So talk a little bit about like your upbringing.
I come from a blended family. I'm the only one of the children my mom and dad had together. We lived in a 3-bedroom house, my mom and I. 3-room house, excuse me. Kitchen, bedroom, and living room, I guess. That was after my mother had separated and divorced her first husband. I was born 5 or 6 years after that, I guess, maybe. My dad was present physically. He wasn't emotionally attached. He was his daddy to us. He worked, my mom worked. My dad worked for a white man on his farm. My mom eventually started cleaning white people's houses, and that's how we made our living. My dad made $25 a week, and my mom made $15 a week, raising 5 kids, 6 kids, first off. I don't know much about the civil rights movement because I was just 15 years old when Reverend King was assassinated. We did not have TV. We had radio, and all we could do was listen to the farm reports and get the weather report, whatever. And then we had gospel on Sundays. So I didn't get to see TV until I was a teenager. And it didn't come on until our work was done in the evening, and it went off at 9 o'clock every night. Eventually my mother took me to help her clean up the white people's houses. And we even had to bring home clothes to iron if we didn't finish her job that day, just to keep up. She did different people. She didn't do the same person. It was a different person every day. They were very disrespectful. Once I realized what was going on, they weren't very respectful to my mom. Because I didn't know anything about the racism stuff, because I wasn't around people. I was home, we were home, we didn't go anywhere. We didn't go into town, we didn't go to eat out. We were just in our own community, living and being raised by our parents in our circle. So I didn't see the snares from the people. I heard about them through my dad, but they would even whisper when they talked about it. They didn't even let us know that it was going on. So I didn't see any of that. I do remember my, I'm probably jumping ahead now. My junior year, my boyfriend wanted to take me to the movies, and we had to go upstairs. And upstairs, it was dark, it was rat infested. You could feel rats running across your feet. It stunk. We couldn't even have steps, we didn't have light to go up to the movie, up to the second level to even see how to get to our seats. I don't know why I knew I was there. I guess I was excited because I had a boyfriend. But we weren't confronted by white people directly. My parents probably got that, and they kept us shielded from that, so I didn't get it firsthand until I went to school, until I was integrated with the children. I was fine protected in our school where we weren't segregated, integrated I mean, but was given an option to integrate. It was by choice the first year. So you can volunteer to go or you can stay, but the next year coming, everybody goes. Well, everybody that went to that school voluntarily that first year, they flunked every black child that went there. They had to redo that year over again. So that's when I started seeing it. And that's when I started resenting having to work for white people and saw what they were paying my mom, how she was slaving all day long, 8 or 9 hours, and getting $3 a day. And then when I chipped in, we didn't get any more. We still was $3 a day. And then she had me go sometimes and clean a house for her to go clean another house. This is like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. I was doing this stuff. So I don't know what happened before this, but I do remember my last day of domestic cleaning. I was at this lady's house, and she was gonna go to the El-Scari, what is that, the racetrack in Little Rock, I think it is. And she said to me, Bessie, or whoever the cat was, is going to have kittens. And when she starts having these kittens, you put her in this bed and help her deliver her cats. Mind you, I hate cats, scared to death of cats. They didn't know Bessie was in the house the whole time I was working there. So I heard the husband come up, and that was probably 10 minutes after she left, and I went outside, and I said, I'm done. He said, you're done already? I said, I'm done, take me home. And I went home, and I told my mother. So I told Tasha, I don't know if I was comatose for a couple of years, because I don't know what she did to me. If she beat me to death, I woke up 2 years later, because I quit the job, and I wouldn't go back. And that was the first time I ever said no to my mom, and I guess she probably didn't do anything to me, because she probably knew why, how I was feeling, how scared I was, and her telling me to take her some cats while she go to the horse races. So I'll just skip forward to when I went back home to visit, and my mother was still working for this lady. This lady she was working for went to school with me, one of my peers, and my mother was cleaning her house still. And I walked out and I told her, I talked to my mother first, and I went out and talked to her, and Natasha was there, and I said, how can you do this to my mother? You're my age, and you have my mother working for you? Do your kids come clean her house? And I had one say, my mother told me I had to call this teacher, Mrs. Harrison, because she was one of the people she worked for. I said, but her daughter don't call you Miss Beauty, so why do I have to call her Miss Harrison? So I was kind of in trouble because I started to see things and hear things, so I started asking questions, and I was kind of called the rebellious child because I asked questions and no one else did. So, and that's kind of the, I don't know, I jumped around, but.
No, you didn't.
My 5 minutes were on.
Yeah. What, if I could just ask you, what was it like? So it was like more of the more middle class families that integrated first.
The ones that thought they were so popular, they were the popular kids, you know, they were the principals and the teachers' kids and the well-known people in the community, yeah.
So their parents had some sort
Had a
of
little bit of money, yeah.
an education, and they went first, and then were met with that. So what was the last day of school like at the all-black school?
Crying, just crying, scared. We were scared. We were scared to go because we didn't know what was going to happen to us. Because we had never been around that many white people. And in my senior yearbook, a guy puts in there, "Good luck, darky." That's what he said to me. That's what's in my senior yearbook right now.
So what was it like for you when you got to the high school?
We were still scared. Scared we was gonna flunk too.
Yeah.
And it was harder because we weren't taught. Black history wasn't in any of our books in any school. So I didn't learn anything about the black history and all our black people, African American people, until Natasha and her sister started going to school. That's where I learned my history. It was not taught to us.
Okay. All right. More later. Yes.
Do you think it would have been better to stay segregated in a way?
For me?
With the schools?
It would have been for me, for all of us. Because we had ours, they had theirs. We had to have something.
What
Everything
was
else
the
was taken
overall
away.
reason for the integration? I mean, was it just like the Martin Luther King type?
I don't know, it was a very, very small town. So I don't know if they thought we'd benefit the town. I don't know that history.
So it's a federal mandate, and the idea was about separate and unequal. So basically, it wasn't just about black schools, but it was black schools did not have the proper funding, resources, the very same thing that happens to our black schools now. They're not called black schools, but look no further than the city of Kansas City, and you can see the difference between schools that have majority white students and schools that have majority black students. It's all the same thing: lack of resources, buildings with major plumbing issues, all different types of things. And
Secondhand books.
secondhand books.
I said if my books were tattered, some pages were missing, some didn't have backs, that kind of stuff.
So everything, once the white schools were finished with them, were just kind of dumped and handed to that. So it would be much like, we have an expectation when we come in here that the damn TV will work. And so imagine if we just had a classroom that the lights may come on, maybe we're super cold, so we're bringing blankets, it might be really hot. There was all these different things. Everybody's learning together. There is no sense of space or any of that. So I would love to take you all on a tour of the schools. I don't know if you all know, but Kansas City Public School is closing a ton of schools. You close schools, it actually increases crime in the neighborhood exponentially and immediately. Because the presence of children does deter crime, at least twice a day. So you have, and the thing about it, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mommy, because Toni Morrison talked about she was cocooned in safety and segregation, right? Y'all don't want us, y'all stay over there, we stay over here. We interact if we have to, if we go to town, get butter and all that, and then we go back to our individual places. And so there was a safety around segregation. Everything is not, and no pun intended, black and white. Everything is not just so dichotomous, like bless you, or however you acknowledge your sneeze. There are different pieces and components to it, right? Much like there's more safety in an all-female bathroom for women than it is. I mean, I've gone to men's restrooms at the club all the time because I can't hold it, but you know what I mean? That was back in the day. And it was a different experience. So think about that. Like, think about the things that we do even as women, right? The differences in safety, all that kind of stuff. So it's the idea of safety and the idea of community, right? That is a protection, and it's the rural South. So there's clearly this separation anyway.
We had the best food in the world. So what did they do? They brought our black cooks to the white school so they could have the best lunch in the world. That's the job they gave them in the kitchen.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. Was that another?
Yeah, I just wanted to, it's not my turn, but I just wanted to just interject something.
Yes, please.
Around that segregation and integration, because I grew up in segregated school. And just imagine, when the law said, you know, you gotta integrate. And in the Deep South, where there was segregation, the white water fountain, the upstairs, you know, all of this separate. No going to the restaurants, this is the black side and the white, all of that. And then the law says you gotta change that. Can you imagine? So this is my first time hearing someone speak of her experience, because I always thought about, because I come from a deep segregated, hostile, racist South. And the law says now they've got to integrate. And just imagine a generation of children who are going into a school where they integrate into that environment, where the teachers are racist, where the children are, and these little black children, now little or whatever their age was, going into that environment that is mandated by the United States government. And what that must have done and what that must have felt like for a bunch of, especially for the black children, to go into an environment for learning and you're not welcome and you're dismissed by the people who are your teachers, who are supposed to be the person that you're going to entrust your life with. Can you just imagine and think of that story in and of itself? And so, from my perspective, someone asked a question, did it serve, you know, how did it serve this country or serve anyone? In my personal perspective, it didn't serve no good. It didn't do, you know, the only thing from my perspective, having lived through that, and the worst part of racism, and I'll tell a little bit about that later on, but you know, really seriously, the only thing that I wish in retrospect is just the right to vote, justice, all of the things that was afforded anybody else, black, brown, white, whatever, that we just needed our rights. Because I think we were doing just fine living amongst each other and taking care of each other as a people. That's what I was saying.
Mm-hmm. Questions? Yes.
It's like another interjection, kind of. It's interesting, like, you guys say that, because my grandmother, she was a teacher that was forced to integrate in schools, like, fresh out of college. Mm-hmm. And so it's just interesting hearing, like, across the board in different experiences, that's, like, the same sentiment. Because she, like, a small town in Texas, in the Panhandle, she always would tell me the same story over again about how the black teachers, all the best black teachers from the black schools, they were sent to the white schools. They didn't have a choice which schools to go to. Mm-hmm. And that made her really upset. And all like these fresh out of college white teachers, no class management, had to be sent to these black schools with like their bias and just, I don't know how to do anything. And you know, the kids just acted wild and just disregard for them. And so it's just interesting hearing that, like, for you guys' generation, like that whole initial integration was just really great, and it's just caused resentment. It's like,
Yeah, and that's why I really wanted you all to kind of come and talk about it, because we have the history, which we get from a national perspective, right? And then, we see these things, we read these things, we hear these things, but it's another to experience them and to see the impact of what we experience personally. Okay, and so up next, Jill.
What?
How did you grow up, Jill? Introduce yourself, please.
Okay. As Natasha said, I am Jill Mesmer.
It's Ms. El-Scari for the class.
Oh, sorry, Ms. El-Scari. I am a contemporary of Wilma here. But first, I really want to say that I need to acknowledge that we are all sitting on stolen land. And the people that look like me were the ones basically responsible for that. And for that, I'm truly sorry. That being said, I will do my best to let you in on how a little racist is made. Because in probably 1960 or so, I came in from playing and I used my new N-word. And immediately my mother says, "Don't you ever say that again, especially not in public." What? It's kind of a license to wink wink, I had no idea what I was saying because I'd learned it from children, nursery rhyme fashion. And so I said, "Well, what's an N-word?" And she said, "It's those people rioting on TV." Well, why? Because they appreciate nothing that's given to them and they complain about everything. Can you even imagine the foundation that lays in a child's mind? Every time a black or something other than white mouth opened with truth, shut it out. And it was unconsciously shutting it out. Yeah. And I was raised rabid Republican Lutheran. So my big rebellion was to go to the dark side, be a Democrat. Well, I was one of those Democrats that, I voted for everything that's gonna help you. I'll sort that crap up there by yourself. No, I had no idea the ropes and pulleys and all the structure that was in place to keep things just as they are. And I stand to benefit from that. And privilege is something that's unearned. So when I figured out that I had white privilege, I thought, well, what can I do with that privilege? Because with every privilege comes responsibility. And so I just made a commitment that I was going to use my voice, not in place of, but to amplify voices that have not been heard for decades.
Jill, where did you grow up?
Iowa, 96% white, 94 now.
So it has,
You had to go to the city or watch television to see anybody that looked different than you.
so when was your first relationship or and by relationship I mean like a colleague that you saw often, or how old were you before you had an experience kind of consistently with somebody who wasn't white?
Probably in my 30s.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you definitely considered yourself to be liberal.
Oh yeah, heck yeah. Look at me. Yeah. I had no clue. So it's very humbling to find out that you've been so wrong for so long.
Sorry, I choked on my water.
It's okay to choke on it. It's, yeah. And so, I think it's really time for people who look like me to start listening. And really, really listen to those that have been oppressed. Believe them, do what you can to support them. I'm not sure what this next election's gonna bring. We may have to burn this thing to the ground, because this foundation is just not good. You can't build on stolen land and on slavery and not make restitution and not change the system. So that's what I'll use my last days for, to try to help out with that.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. Well, nice to meet you, and I hearing you talk has made me think about also my country, because I'm from Nicaragua, and even though we have a culture that is more mixed, I feel there is a lot of racism in our system. And I come also from an area that is mostly white, and people, when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening here, people Nicaraguans were saying that, oh, that doesn't happen here in our country. And I was like, what do you mean? There is racism everywhere. And right now in the Caribbean, the Afro-Caribbeans are suffering from criminal organizations entering into their territories and stealing their lands, their properties. And nobody is talking about that. I don't see national news in my country talking about that. And in this last election, there was a black candidate, the only black candidate. And the only thing that people were saying about him was, why is Bob Marley in running for candidate? And I was like, you are not hearing his proposals. You are not focusing on his arguments. You are focusing on their physical appearance. So I feel like this fight against racism is not only like here in the United States, it's like worldwide.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Really.
Yes.
It was really, I guess I like slightly relate to some of the things you were talking about like a foundational like experience, because I was raised for the most part when I was younger, like in Germany, like really distant from a lot of my roots in like the South. But something that you said about like doing whatever you can, it makes me think about I guess like performative activism in like a way. And I was wondering if you had like an experience where you kind of had to like contend with something that is kind of like faux, like progressive, like with like a peer of like yours, or somewhere I guess like close in your like vicinity, if that's like a clear enough question.
Have I had to deal with someone close to me not joining me in this inquiry, or?
Not necessarily. I think I mean, so as you're like devoting this like time like right now to learn more, to help more effectively instead of like in a surface level way, like how do you feel about like the forms of like activism that are like more performative in like a way, like say something loud, and even though it might like on like a surface level, I guess like move some movement or whatever towards like its goal or whatever, it's like, do you have any like specific like thoughts on how that's like I guess like deeper than like the superficial level or whatever, like how that's kind of like damaging or anything like that?
If I'm following your train of thought, you're talking about different levels of activism, right?
And those that are more performative, meaning
Yeah,
a
you're
white
out
person
there.
marching, Black
You're
Lives
out there.
Matter, black, and making sure they're on television and holding hands with their black boyfriend or girlfriend, and then not going home and talking about it with their parent, maybe washing it off and acting like they were somewhere else and not at the march. Is that what you mean? Am I giving like an example of that?
Yeah. I think
So
that's
something
good.
that is more like, you know, this is,
Here I am, it's fashionable, but there's no longevity.
yeah.
Yeah, that was brought, wow. I was doing the silent march after George Floyd, and there was a man that was across the street at the then Sprint Center, and he looked over at us and he said, "So, how long are you gonna do this for? It's all good and well now. How long are you gonna do it for?" You know, I wanted to go over and talk to him. Then just right up the street, there was a man with tears in his eyes, another African-American man. Thank you. And they're both right. They're both right. Because they have every right to wonder about our motives because of the 1960s. Because we got our rights and just kind of left everybody, especially in voting, you know. And a lot of us, in my generation, we were hippies, but we sold out. We went back to the system, helped it grind and work. So yeah, there's a lot of hesitancy as to our motives, and I totally understand. Time is what will prove proof's in the pudding.
And I want to kind of, so I can't remember what the situation was, Jill, but really a time when you have had to be around other white people who thought they were helping and they really were not helping, or they were being performative. I think, is that what you're also asking? Like,
Yeah.
how did you confront if you were interacting with another white person who really thought they were being helpful, they really thought they were being an activist, and they really weren't? It was actually being harmful or hurtful. Have you had that level of interaction?
Well, I would say the march over there at Southeast Unity, you know, there were people that were taking over the march that happened on Martin Luther King holiday, and I believe it was the Million Man March or something, the answer to the Million Man March. It was the Women's March, answer to the Million Man's March. And a minister here in town, man, took over that march, and little by little we could see, you know, exactly how he was trying to use this opportunity to enrich his congregation and make a name for himself and all kinds of stuff. And we had to talk amongst ourselves, and there were quite a few of us that pulled out and said, why? And I didn't want to be part of that. They wanted me to be on the committee, and we didn't know anybody to go and ask so that we could tokenize them, basically. But they wanted to do that, and then I was supposed to go the next year and form relationships with people after doing that to them. So yeah, you do have to kind of call people out if what they're doing is not helpful, causing more division. Does that begin to answer? Okay.
Thank you. All right, Mother Mary?
Yes. I'm known now as Mother Mary. I'm a senior, I'm an elder, senior citizen, born 1944, 78 years old, young, old. Born in the deep segregated South, a place called Froggy Bottom, which is really at the very top of the Louisiana boot that borders Arkansas, Texas, and they call it the Arklatex, and Mississippi, down in that area. And wow, in my experience, I don't know if it could be any more extreme, of extreme racism to the extreme. My father, who was born in 1897, I come from a very large family. I'm 11 of 13 children, and on a plantation, on a cotton plantation, where a cotton sack was put on my back when I was 5 years old. You start to pick cotton at 5. That was mandatory. Every black family, they had a black child. You were out in the cotton field picking cotton. And my older sister, who's living now, my older sibling, that's 86 years old, and my older, 86 and 84, my older sisters. 8 of us are still alive now.
Right.
And just an idea of picking cotton. You know, the little cotton balls that you buy at the CVS or whatever, you know, you want to do your little face thing. Or just look at 3 of those, 3 little cotton balls. You pull those out of the bowls of cotton. And it's an art to reaching in there and pulling it out without poking your hand. But just imagine 250 pounds a day. Cotton. In a burlap sack. 250 pounds. My older sister Bobby could pick up to 250 pounds. Between 200 and 250 pounds, her and Patton, they're still alive. And my top weight by the time I was 10 or 11 was like 140 pounds. That's what I'm picking. And for like $2 a day per 100 pounds. That you may as well consider that free labor. Pay what? Sharecropping what? Share what? It's a joke, quite frankly. And one of the really, kind of smart ways, to weigh your cotton, because you got to keep shucking, shake it down so you can get more in there. And of course, the cotton sacks for children were the 6-foot burlap sacks that you strap on you and you're picking and you're putting in here. It's an art to it. And when you hit like 13 or 14, when you're older, then you have the 12-foot burlap sacks, and you weigh it in. And of course, the slave master, Paul Slack's place. We grew up on Paul Slack's, who was a slave master. He comes out and rides his horse to make sure you're bending over and picking cotton. And, may bring a little bit of water, but just, we can do a little dipper or whatever. So, I don't want to get, that's as much as I will say about that. The terror and zero rights, zero. Because if you didn't have, a white person, the slave masters, to come and vouch for you, if you got pulled over or whatever you went to jail with, which was for nothing, really, quite frankly. Passing the sheriff in a 35-mile-an-hour zone and he's going 30 and you pass him going 35, but you get arrested. And you go straight to jail. And if someone, the slave master, don't come and vouch for you, so that's one of mine, he works on my place, then you go straight to jail, straight to prison. A court, what is that? The judge in a kangaroo court, where there's the order of justice system. What's that? No. So, I've had some experiences of extreme. And I'm still here to tell about it. My big question, even though I was experiencing that as a little black, dark-skinned child. Oh, the darker you are, oh wow. that does make a difference. You know, you had that conversation this early on about the hues of skin and that kind of thing. You know, where I am now, you know, having lived through all of that hate, you know, my big question is for anybody, black and white, like technicolor, whatever you are, how do you do hate? How do you do that? How does one do hate? I don't hate white people. My mother wouldn't know. I don't hate white people, even the racist, most visceral ones. But I hate racism. That's what I hate. There's two things that I hate. You know, I hate okra. I don't like okra. The only thing that I hate worse than I think is, you know, racism has moved up in front of okra, because I thought okra was the thing I hated more than anything in the world. Seriously, but racism, and primarily because of the, you know, of the work that I've had to do to heal the damage it did to the soul of a black child. How my soul got damaged because I've literally witnessed the Ku Klux Klan, for real, riding up and down roads, burning crosses, and my little 5-year-old brain, my little 5-year-old mind, you know. Because the only safe place for black people to gather in the Deep South was at church, okay? That's the only safe place to go. Well, the juke joints, you know, that's what. But the only safe place where we could gather. And even with that, the slave master would come and peer through the windows to make sure you weren't there to make trouble, you know, yo. And so, my word, you know, what I want to say, I mean, overall, because I can just go on and on about the terrible stories of horror and stories of terror. And thankfully now that we are starting to deal with that 5-letter word called trauma in our mental health now, our mental wellness. I'm sort of working on mine and taking this, I mean, seriously. Because with all the upsurge of this, and I know what it represents, and that's the trigger, you know, I've been dealing with the trigger. It triggers that thing back that I remember so well, you know, of the incidences, you know, when Emmett Till was murdered. And it was just about that time when my little brother, who didn't step off the sidewalk for a white man and his wife, because you're supposed to step off the sidewalk, get out of the way. And my little brother didn't. And he was arrested at 11 years old. I watched them take my brother away with a chain around his neck on both of his wrists and on both of his ankles. And we didn't know where he was, and they kept him for like a week. And witnessing my mother going around begging somebody to save my little brother's life. And of course, Mr. Slack, who did, Mr. Slack, wow. Oh, by the way, but the children that she was telling the story of, the children that you raise, you take care of them, because Mrs. Slack drove up every single morning to pick up my mother with her rollers in her hair and blow the horn, and my mother would come out after she done made us our biscuits and everything there for breakfast and whatever. Because she got to go to their house to fix their breakfast, and to cook lunch for the bridge parties, and to have dinner done when she leaves and come home. And by the way, she did all the washing and the starching and ironing of the clothes and all, and then she raised the children. But when they turned 16, she told them all the way from birth till 12 or 13 or 14 or 15, but in the Deep South during that time, when they turned 16, you got to say yassa. So I could go on, and what I hope, because I've been observing, in this room with all of the conversations and what have you. And, you know, how's this thing gonna, how's it gonna turn? What's gonna, I pray for the soul of the children, because I know how my soul got damaged by the hate and racism. Because I was a man, I don't have nothing to do with that God. In my little brain, that cross, I remember them burning crosses down in Early's house down the road, that dirt road, and then in the church they had this cross up there, and my little 5-year-old brains couldn't make the connection. I didn't want to have anything to do with that. In fact, my mother died not knowing that I dug a hole in the ground and cursed that God. I didn't want to have anything to do with that God. Then I got scared. After I did that, used those words, screaming at this, because the one thing that my mother instilled in me, she did put into me, she shook it into me, you know, a God conscious. You know, I was conscious enough to know that this entity, I had done a really bad thing. And, you know, where I sit now and I think about the soul of not only black children, but white children too. Because I pray for the soul of white children and black children, and because you're damaging the soul of a white child when you teach them racism. Because it's put in them. When they're in their early years, you know, you grow up in an environment and that is what you hear, and that's what's put in you, and you go out into the world with that in you. So can nobody tell me that these police officers, you can't tell, because it's in them. You know how they feel about a black person, period. So you know, where's the compassion? If you grow up with that belief system in you, you know, and all the triggers right there that's put in you, all of the negative and bad things been said about a black person, that's, you know, it's put in you in the environment, in the society that you grow up in. So what I will say is examine, you know, this is hard work. I don't, you know, I think if marches or anything gonna change white people's mind, no. You gotta do your own work. You gotta ask, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? Who did it come from? And what's their story? That's taking a look at your own belief system. What you believe and why you believe it, who did it come from? And so it's cycles, it's been passed on. And I'm hoping and praying, you know, that this generation will break the cycle, do it the other way. You know, the hate and the blaming and the shaming and all that, and the pointing finger, the barking and the guilting, and it's not helping anybody. You can't bark and guilt people into changing. You know, it starts in the heart. And that's looking at your own self and the world around you. Because I recognize negativity, and I recognize hate, and I recognize something that's not going to serve the world or serve me. And you know what I do? Remove myself. I do not engage. You know, to get into an argument into, you know, about you're right and you're wrong, and that way, you know, we can have the discussion. And this, you know, I pray for it, and we are at least having the conversation about race.
Can I?
And racism.
Okay. No, thank you. Yes.
I know.
Before, no, you're fine.
Okay.
I need to just apologize, one, because the lecture went longer because we watched the movie, the rest of the movie.
Okay.
So I do apologize.
Long-winded.
No, you're not long-winded. That was fine. Yeah, I think it was important. I want to just get final comments from you all because we're at the 9:20 mark.
Wow.
But if you all want to stay and chat a little bit after class with any of them, you're welcome to. But my question is, Mommy, or do you all have any comments first? Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
So it's good to see like 3 different perspectives on the panel, because a lot of things that are discussed politically in the world is like, oh, that happened 100 years ago, or that happened such and such years ago. And, you know, you got age groups that are in front of us that's saying, no, it happened when I was 5 years old, or whatever the case may be. Where it's like, you know, it's not ever really over. over.
Mm.
It's just a level of comprehension over what's going on and like you were saying, having conversations about it, because this is very sensitive. Like it causes like the emotions to come out, you know, and it's just really hard, especially when other people are unable to identify those traumas in a way, if I'm explaining that right.
Yeah.
Some,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and to hear our story, right, and that this is the American story, you all. All three of these women are American citizens, you know, living in Kansas City, Missouri, right? You know, all in the heart of the city, and they all have come into each other's lives in different ways, and we have these really difficult